This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to the OI podcast, the Otago Institute podcast, in-depth conversations with experts from the worlds of arts, sciences and mataranga Māori. Brought to you by the Otago Institute, the Otago branch of the Royal Society for Arts and Sciences. Kia ora, I'm Dr. Barb, and today we are starting our mini-series on coping with dementia. Some of the content that we're talking about today may trigger feelings or emotions, and we hope that there's also useful information there, but just be aware that this is a tough conversation and tough listening material for a lot of people out there. But we hope it's helpful in facing challenges that a lot of people are facing. And I've got some scary statistics here. Almost 70,000 Kiwis are living with dementia today. Almost 170,000 Kiwis are likely to be living with dementia by 2050. 4 out of 5 New Zealanders know or have known someone living with dementia. Dementia impacts more women than men, around 30% higher. The total cost of dementia to Aotearoa is now about $2.5 billion and will reach around $5.9 billion by 2050. Residential care currently accounts for around half of the economic cost of dementia borne by the government, $1.21 billion. Dementia numbers are increasing at a faster rate amongst Maori, Pacifica and Asian populations than those of European New Zealanders. Care partners provide over 1 million hours of unpaid care every week. Every 3 seconds, someone in the world develops dementia. There are over 50 million people worldwide living with dementia in 2020. This number will almost double every 20 years, reaching 82 million in 2030 and 152 million in 2050. And the fastest growth in the elderly population is taking place in China, India, and their South Asian and Western Pacific neighbours. All from the Alzheimer's Disease International, and I think everyone can agree that there are some very scary statistics there. Today we have in the studio Antoinette McClean, the manager of Alzheimer's Otago, and this podcast is the first in this mini-series, and we're talking about everyday tips and strategies to manage dementia, behaviours and communication tips, travel and some holiday advice, and how to access services, what an EPOA is, an advanced care plan, and how to get a diagnosis. But first I want to welcome Antoinette to the studio. Thank you very much for coming along, Antoinette.
Thank you. Kia ora.
It's great to have you here. And I thought first we could just cover a bit about Alzheimer's Otago. What is Alzheimer's Otago? What do they do? And critically, I guess, is do you have to have an Alzheimer's diagnosis before going to Alzheimer's Otago?
Yeah, thank you. So Alzheimer's Otago is a non-for-profit organisation. We provide carer support to the care partners of people with dementia and also, where possible, activities for people with a dementia diagnosis. You don't have to have a diagnosis of dementia to come into our service. So whilst we're called Alzheimer's Otago, we will support anyone with any type of dementia that they are facing. And some people come into the service as a self-referral with some concerns, and we will then guide them into getting a diagnosis so that we're dealing with the correct diagnosis there of dementia, and it does sort of help with the needs assessment when there is a diagnosis.
And a needs assessment, what is that?
So that is a needs assessment is for over 65s, the care coordination service, and they would do the needs assessment of people, as I said, over 65. Sometimes in cases it's above 50 because the prevalence of younger onset dementia is coming through a bit stronger. That is people that are under 65, so roughly between 55 and 65 years of age, people are getting a diagnosis of dementia.
Wow. So that's classed as early onset diet?
Younger onset. Early onset, if we break it down, is more when you've had the diagnosis earlier on in the dementia journey. And then mild to moderate is the different stages, so mild, moderate, advanced, and then younger onset is classified under 65 because there are different needs for, as you can imagine, for someone who's under 65, they're still working, younger children, spouses working.
Just different stage of life.
And
completely.
Different activities or different things, different needs.
Yeah, and maybe catching it at an earlier stage as well, where you're still more able to do more things.
That's
I
right,
guess.
yeah. The earlier you can get onto getting that diagnosis of these concerns, or at least reaching into Alzheimer's Otago for support, the better it is for making a better plan for quality of life during that journey.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people, I mean, Alzheimer's seems like quite a scary thing, and there might be quite a lot of people who are thinking, oh, it's just, I don't want to go there because it's kind of admitting that maybe I'm scared of it. And do you get a lot of people, or do you get people coming in who perhaps don't actually have dementia?
That's right. They come in often. It's the family members that will notice there's that behavioural change. That's often one of the most common signs that they see that there's a behavioural change, and they'll come in going, I'm a bit concerned about mum or dad or brother or sister and stuff. So we would say, okay, it probably is a really good idea to go to your GP first. Go and talk about having some memory issues. The GPs can do what we call a mini ACE test, memory test. It's performed at the GP, and from there they can then determine if the GP or clinical specialist is comfortable in giving diagnosis. Not every GP, in our experience, gives that diagnosis or is comfortable to give it, or there is a delay in doing the diagnosis just due to how do you deliver that information. And on top of all of that, the person who's got that potentially dementia diagnosis can have lack of insight, and then of course there's that extreme denial. And then there is also the stigma that comes with it. And so that's that barrier, or that fright that you say, Alzheimer's, it's quite a word to swallow.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting through that stigma is huge. That is a problem we have here in the world, or even, New Zealand, is the stigma that comes attached to it.
And I guess also a lot of people it is natural as you get older to, be a little bit forgetful and stuff. It's not always dementia. So it's not, sometimes you're kind of concerned about nothing.
That's right.
It is worth actually going and
we do lose a little of our memory as we age, but dementia is not a normal part of aging.
Yeah. Often
people think it is, it's not. Your risks are higher as you get older, and other risk factors that you have if you've got a bad diet or your diabetes or, a stroke, your risks are higher, but it doesn't mean that just because you're aging, everyone's going to get dementia. Some people don't.
Yeah.
But so I think those are the risk factors really around that.
And of course being female as well, 30% higher.
Yeah, the research, there's loads and loads of research going on there, and they haven't quite determined why. There is some research that is indicating it's due to when we have the our midlife change.
Oh, right.
Where potentially there's that brain fog and there's another sort of brain sort of shutdown, whether there's some other type of atrophy that happens. It's not confirmed, it's just some of the research indicates that. But there is lots of research going on internationally, continually trying to... We know what causes the different types of dementia in the brain, what is happening in the brain. We know like Lewy body, frontal temporal, Alzheimer's and vascular. We know what happens, we know the behaviours that are attached and all that. Sometimes we don't know what has caused that atrophy, what has made that change in the brain. That is still a big piece of research work.
And of course we'll have, later on in the series, we'll have Yoram Barrett come along and talk from that very clinical point of view and help describe, the processes and the medication and all those sort of, that kind of research and clinical point of view. But before we go too much further, I thought just a little bit of background on yourself there. How did you come to be in New Zealand and be the manager of Alzheimer's?
Well, I am born South African.
Alzheimer's Otago there. I was giving you a massive promotion by a slip of the tongue.
That's all right. So I'm South African born and left my hometown of Durban when I was 21. That's many years ago now. Travelled overseas to go and, see the world and meet a lovely little Dunedin boy. And here I am in Dunedin, married to a Kiwi. Now I am New Zealand myself. But I spent my schooling days in South Africa.
Wow.
And then came to New Zealand to have 3 children. And after doing some courses in management and where the opportunity arose, I took on a management role with, at the time, then Play Centre Aotearoa. So I have a passion for working in a non-for-profit NGO spaces. I really feel there's value in the work that we do, so it gives me a really good feeling that we're trying to make a difference to people's lives.
And how did you get into the whole dementia space?
At that time, after 8 years of placing Te Aroa, I felt that there was a space that I needed to sort of grow as my children were growing, and an opportunity arose where I thought, well, here's a very similar role on the other age spectrum. I had always wanted to know, what is this dementia? Like many people, it's a word that I go, ooh, what is it? It sounds scary, it sounds awful. And once you have done lots of education and training, you realise that there's a lot out there. There's a lot that can be done. And so this opportunity arose. And, I became the manager of Alzheimer's Otago, and I've learned a lot.
Oh, imagine in a role like that.
Yes.
So I guess starting the conversation, I think that probably for a lot of people, either the GP or Alzheimer's Otago is the first place that they go seeking information or help, and possibly a self-referral, but possibly also friends or family. And I guess that was my thinking, or our thinking, around putting this show in that run up to Christmas, because it is a time where there's a lot of, people have some time off, people are getting together, big family occasions, and it might be you haven't seen mum or dad for, a couple of weeks, maybe some months if you're in the other side of the island or something, and everyone gets together, and then you sort of are spending a lot of time in a sort of a situation where you're there, hanging around, and it is possible that the expectations and the larger festivities around the holiday season often are a tipping point or a threshold there for a lot of families. And I thought just maybe go through some kind of what things we might be looking for, behaviours around dementia that we're...
So often people that are living with dementia can sometimes behave in ways that seem out of character. So, for example, they may overreact to a stimulation or a situation that would seem problematic or difficult to deal with. And that could happen in Christmas, where there's a lot of stimulation and lots of people, that their routine has been disrupted, there's newbies coming in, the families have, as you said, they've been away and suddenly go, oh, there's a bit of a change to mum, something's a bit off. So their reactions and their communication is a wee bit tricky. And so we want to sort of, the first steps to responding skillfully to those difficult behaviours is to an understanding of how that may affect a person, and an ability to look for the need the person is trying to meet through their behaviour. So remembering that dementia is causing that behaviour, not the person.
Yeah.
The person is still there. They're saying, I am still me, which is the voice of people with lived experience. I am still me. I just look a little bit different.
Yeah, I guess it's that earlier stage than that, when they're maybe nobody's recognised yet that there may be an issue with dementia there. And I guess you're coming round, what sort of signs and symptoms would you be thinking about? I mean, there's that forgetfulness, like I've put my keys in the fridge, I can't remember, I'm confused about what day it is maybe, or confusing faces.
So there are...
Talking.
Yep. So there is where you would have your daily tasks. You're not sort of be able to perform. You might forget, how to use the microwave or make a cup of tea. You misplace the keys. Not necessarily you can't find them, but you've put them in the fridge. So that's kind of a bit of a challenge. We think that's not where I should put them. You've got some behavioural changes where you're overreacting. They're not the same person they were. You're forgetting. So
a bit of
names.
Anxiety in there as well.
Names where you would forgetting. So you might go to the same thing every week, bowls or whatever it is. You go at the same time. Suddenly that is not happening, or you've noticed mum's forgotten that she goes to something every week, or the names in that club they've forgotten. Dad doesn't know who he's playing golf or bowls with. That's a bit of a signal there. Those are the signs that we have.
And I guess sometimes that short-term memory, like just repeating things that they've already said a joke, or they've already said a story, or they've already asked you the question and you've answered
repetitive,
before,
sort of
or
triggering
those sort of triggering type things. And then I guess, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it's all things that actually might also not be dementia.
Yeah. So sometimes things like a UTI, for example, if you've got a UTI infection, they do mimic the symptoms of brain fog, and that can mimic.
So UTI is a urinary tract infection, which is quite common.
Yep, and so that can trigger the similar symptoms, brain fog and stuff. So we want to make sure that We always say if someone comes in without a diagnosis, they've walked in, we say, wonderful, that's a really good step. What have you got? And then we say it'd be really good if you went back to GP and asked for a test of it, miniase, and if you can't do it with that GP, to find another GP specialist to really make sure that's what you're dealing with.
And really check out all the other, like what they call the alternate diagnosis, the differential diagnosis there. And because, and I think that's part of the thing with dementia is that we get, I don't know, it's quite easy to get so scared of something that you don't even check it out, so you don't actually know what it is that you're dealing with.
That's right.
And also that you can sort of put things off so long that actually it makes it more difficult, and you could have got more help earlier on. And I guess that's where someone like Alzheimer's Otago and your GP as well, they come in, because there are strategies for coping. And some of the things that go along with dementia, like, hallucinations or anxiety or paranoia, some of those symptoms of dementia can be alleviated with medication. And we will talk more about that with Professor Urim when he comes on. But I think just some of those behavioural tips and how to deal with that, because that, I think, is where we're looking at over the Christmas holidays, and things that could be helpful to those out there who are just, people who might not yet have a diagnosis, but they're just thinking, oh, mum's asked the same question 6 times.
How do we manage that? Everyone's got their patience, and everyone's having a great time and stuff. So I guess if you imagine the dementia brain, the best way I can explain it is it's like a bookcase, your brain. You've got your hippocampus and your amygdala. And so in your early stages, and you've got a functioning brain, your bookshelves are all in order, early stage, mid stage, and then later in life, and your books are all in tidy order, all colour coordinated and everything. As there's a brain atrophy and stuff, that you imagine the books are starting to fall off, they're starting to get dusty, some of them lying on their sides, they're not organised in sizes and shapes, and some have even fallen away. And then as the disease progresses even more, then some of the shelves are falling off until eventually there's only a few books left, and that's in your early stages or your earlier life. That's how I like to describe it. So there's lots of behavioural things going on as you move through the dementia. It could be just something small initially, and then it sort of progresses. So
you're more likely to be losing short-term memory first, and then and often people can recall things from past Christmases and when they were a child and stuff, and recall those things easier. So
that's the last part of your memory that sort of goes as your early childhood. And that's why often you might see someone that might say to their wife, refer to them as their sister from when they were little, or has affiliation with something that's childlike, it's like a doll or a doggy.
So what's the best thing to do there if someone is referring to someone as the wrong person? Is like correcting them, or just going along with it a lot?
A bit of a mixture of correcting them and going along with them. You've got to, I guess, as the care partner or family, decide if you keep correcting them, it makes them agitated and upset. And sometimes you've got to take yourself out of that position and go, it's not about me, it's about how they're trying to communicate. They're trying to tell me a story. They're engaged, they're animated, they're making some conversation. Let's just, go with it, steer them away. Sometimes you might have to, if I say that, not say necessarily a white lie, but you're going to have to just sort of make it up, a little bit of what's real, what's in the past. And
what I do as well is introduce myself.
Yes, you have to.
So don't leave it to them. And if you're there, if you're just working into the first sentence, hello mum, hello dad, whatever, then they immediately know who you are because you've just told them. So they don't have that anxiety and that awkwardness if they can't recall. And that sort of makes things easier going along.
Yep. And if you're a gentle touch. Familiar, hi mum, it's Barbara. I've come down. You're back in Dunedin, or I've come to wherever you live, or something like that. You just familiarise that routine. I see you've got your dog. It's really good. I think if you try not to say the word "do you remember" or "don't you remember," that's really key, because that puts them in that really sort of frightful. If they still got an insight, they go, "Oh, yeah, that's right, I can't remember and I'm really panicking, because that's what they're feeling and they're trying to hide it. So you can sometimes go, you used to have a red car when you were 18 at some, so tell me about it.
Yeah.
And then you can do it that way.
Sort of prompting the memory rather than those sort of direct questions, because they're sort of more confrontational and they
inviting the conversation in.
Yeah, so just kind of, and I think that's just a bit of kind of really doing some more work on the thinking of how you're engaging with the conversation as you're doing it. So,
And planning or some lists help as well. If that's earlier stages, something on the fridge, some signs around the house. Today we're going to do something at 11 o'clock, we're getting dressed, all of that, to try and just, so there's a plan and everyone has an idea at those earlier stages if they're open to that, into that. So it helps.
I guess the other thing is sort of like reminding them without reminding them as well.
Yep.
Like, come on, Mum, we're off out on the walk, rather than saying, do you want to go for a walk?
Yeah. Today we're going to go for a walk to your favourite garden and smell that whatever you like. Or if you're still able, go to a coffee place and say we're going to have a coffee or a cup of tea or stuff like that. And getting out and about, socialising and communication and conversation is really, really key. The other thing, if you're feeling that there's just a moment that they can get stuck, where they just can't get past whatever it is for whatever reason, their brain just cannot, work through that, you can sometimes put some music on. That really, music and dementia is research-based, showing that it just really helps soothes. And
it sort of triggers a different part of your brain.
And it distracts the brain or the person from what they're struggling with and they're challenged with. So I guess it's frustration because they're trying to communicate. They can't. Not everything's working. It's if you imagine trying to send the simple task of a text. We take it for granted that we can pick up a phone. We use the hands. We know we can write a message. We know exactly what to do. But if you take away some of those skills, how hard would it be to do a text? That's what it's like every day, where their fingers might not work. As you get dementia, you get tunnel vision as well. So your peripheral is closing down on the outside. So that's why when we say to people, slow conversations, come into the front, allow them time to answer and process, repeat it again, but just remain calm as much as you can in that situation.
And I guess having fewer people in the conversation as well.
Simple,
so it's
simple
much easier to have a one-on-one conversation rather than having, a group of 3 or 4 people and then they're trying to keep track of who's saying what as well as who the people are and where it's happening. It's all those things is just, and that can be really key, I guess, over the Christmas holiday period when there are, families gathered and more people there and
sort of lots going on. You want to be specific when you're communicating. Eye contact is really, really key. And also gestures, act out. Thinking that when you communicate, 93% is non-verbal cues. And
so it's really all your facial features,
Smiling
and
being straightforward and simple and just clear, short sentences, 11 o'clock, we're going to go to...
And I guess, that's also judging with the person as well. Like, you have to be responding to the stage or the place that your loved one is at. So, you don't have to be speaking in short sentences. If, you don't want to over-exaggerate it. So it's a matter of just,
reading where they are placed, and then the progression might have gone a bit more, as you said.
Yeah.
Some dementias, the progression is a steady flow like Alzheimer's. Others, like Lewy body, is stepped, so they might remain at a stage for a while, and then there's a significant drop.
Yeah.
That's when the family's members might go, uh-oh,
there's
a different.
Happening here.
And then Lewy body is spiked, so they might have seen them in a really good place and they've dropped down and then suddenly they bounce back. It's just how the different dementias...
Types of dementia.
Yeah.
Oh,
and we do see in the central areas, central Queenstown and Wanaka, also when people have got holiday homes that live outside of Otago, they come home, they've got 3-4 months in those areas. That's when sometimes these behaviours become quite prevalent because they're out of their
normal zone.
What was their home was a holiday home was also normal, but it's not anymore.
Right.
So it's trying to just adjust, help those key partners and families to go, right, there are ways that you could probably familiarise or prepare them for that or be familiar.
And so I guess over the holiday period, GPs might be busy, it might be difficult for people to access help immediately.
Yeah.
But I think there are some things that you still can be doing to help yourself over that holiday period.
Yep.
And, you know, the Alzheimer's Otago and the Alzheimer's New Zealand web pages have a lot of information on them there with tips and tricks and
practical things, how to manage, how to communicate, what could you do, on travelling holidays. So the thing I would say is don't overdo it over Christmas. Be kind to yourself. Put lots of plans in place. Keep it simple and familiar, and try and include as much of the family or whānau in. If they don't know someone has had a diagnosis, if you can, find a way to let them know, or at least some strategies around, okay, this triggers mum or dad, or this triggers Uncle Bob, or whatever. This is how we're going to manage it, or if this happens, how can we avoid those sort of situations? Or, it's probably good in the afternoon that mum has a little bit of quiet time.
Yeah, because there is that sundowning, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's when the brain is sort of overstimulated, agitated, as you can imagine, everything, your stress is running really
very
high.
Much, that's really a lot of holiday and Christmas time.
Yep.
So I guess, sort of one strategy for dealing with that might be going for a lunchtime. Early lunch, late lunch type times. So you've got, and taking over a lot of that stress of preparation, just doing it with whoever in the kitchen, so they're still included in things.
That's right.
But
they can choose to lay the table or choose the colour or decorate the Christmas tree or bauble. You can still include them because they probably would appreciate that. They just don't know how to do it. They don't want to be overwhelmed because they're like, I don't know how to do this.
That's a tricky bit there as well, is judging whether they are wanting help or needing help, or whether they, just doing it with them. So that's really all about communication there.
And giving them and being able to empower them to say you can re-enable it. You might have to change things. So let's say it was mum was always doing the Christmas dinner, which in a lot of cases they are, right?
Yeah.
Mum's doing the kitchen. She's got everything organised. She now has dementia and it is more prevalent and she's not able to do those meals and stuff. And so that purpose is probably gone. She's feeling sad, low mood. You could still include mum in saying, right, mum, what's the plans? What dinner shall we make? We'll make it. You come involved. You stir the pot or you peel some potatoes, whatever they can do. You looked at that restaurant that makes mistakes. They're still able to do quite a lot. You just have to re-enable them to give them that power
back. So I guess
back.
it's that keeping it light and keeping it happy. Put some nice familiar music on, some happy music, and don't go with the too many questions. So go with, Mum, I'm gonna put the potatoes on. Are you okay with doing this? Or
mindful of the food they might have to can or can't eat or something like that, because their food changes as well. Some become very sweet tooth orientated and never were, and other the extremes. So all of that. Also bring back old memories, because as I said, your earlier life comes prevalent. So
Christmas is really a time for nostalgia and looking back on how things were and getting some old photographs out, some photo albums out. That can all be quite...
Yeah, and that animates and stimulates the brain and gets those neurons fired up so they can have a good day if it's Boxing Day or Christmas Day. And maybe it is only you do Christmas Day and then Boxing Day is quiet, then another day.
And I guess also that keeping things a bit simpler, you could, rather than having, the in-laws and everyone on Christmas Day, have a shorter Christmas Day, have it at lunchtime. And then have time so that you can have some rest in the afternoon, and then go and see the in-laws on, the 26th or 27th, have a day in between, and then spin it out. So it's little bits at a time, so you're still doing things.
Or if your family are staying in your home, you invite them to maybe go out for the afternoon. When we run programs for people living with dementia,
that's
morning,
a good idea.
10 to 12 is the time that we have the programs. That's the best time, and even in age residential care facilities, that's the golden time too. Yeah. Then a bit of lunch, and then there's a rest time, a quiet time, and then possibly they, night time they're again a bit more stimulated or not. But don't try and drag it out for too long. You might just get them tired or agitated, and that would help for someone if they have to bring them out from an aged residential care facility to bring them into their own home. That's another challenge as well, as how do you do that? Maybe you do a practice run. You work with the aged care place to say, we're going to bring Dad out, only a few hours, go back with Dad, settle him in.
See if it works, see how the person is with it.
Yeah.
And I guess, most of the aged care places, they are really good around Christmas.
Yes.
And they do tend to have a special Christmas dinner and just ask what the situation is, what the festivals are. How and I guess be prepared to be flexible is a big one as well.
Absolutely. And if it all falls over and it breaks down within an hour, that's fine. Just give a quiet space, or mum has to go back, or you just go for a walk, or the family need to just go. Okay, well, we'll just go for a wander and pick some flowers and come back when things have settled down. Yeah. It all just depends on where they are in that dementia and how they're behaving.
And everyone and everyone's situation with dementia, I imagine, is quite different.
It's unique.
So it's unique because every person is unique, and how dementia, what type it is, how it's affecting them, where they are in it, all of those things and all the triggers and everything are all unique. So as much as it would be great to just have like a checklist, these are the things here, and
it's trial and error.
And I think that's that kind of just. And I guess that also leads you back to the carers as well, and taking care of themselves. Because if you're irritable, if you're tired and anxious,
which Christmas generally brings out on a lot of people, right? Regardless of whether we're talking about dementia and stuff. So it is plan ahead, get those presents in advance, get the food in advance, and just make sure your prescriptions or anything that might have closed down. Get ahead, plan ahead. That's all I can say.
That's a good thing about prescriptions
organising
as well.
Cover if necessary, knowing when your GP's closed, knowing when the chemist is closed. Getting the family to help you, making a list of out-of-hour services in case something happens. Packing in advance if you are going to visit family. Make sure everything is.
She's got more tips than I would ever have
thought. You've got to just be really organised. And for some people who don't live in an organised space, it is really tricky. But I guess from when we work with care partners and family around supporting them to be the best carer they can and their own mental well-being, we do say, plan, organise, just keep it simple. Yeah. Don't try and do everything. You have to change how you do things. And if it's just a Christmas morning, that's all you can manage, then that's all that manages. Yeah. And, changes.
And just scaling down things, I think, is a really good idea. Don't be too ambitious.
Yep.
And really keep your expectations. I mean, I don't know. I think I
keep
feel
it fun, or try and put some fun in the music, fun movie. We find in the programs that we run, we really try and keep them lighthearted and fun, and they've still got humour and they've still got all of that. It's just it comes out in different times, and you can sometimes prompt it and invite it in some of the things that you do.
Yeah, no, that's quite a good observation there, and I guess extra tips for travelling.
Yeah, so when you travel, you can still travel. A person can change, obviously with dementia, and their moods and memory, and you think, I'm not able to travel. But you can still go on a journey. Obviously, the earlier in that dementia, the
so that really
it is.
Depends on the individual and the stage that they're in.
Yeah, if they're getting to sort of be an advanced stage and there's a little bit of incontinence and there's issues with eating and there is really a little bit of walking with purpose we refer to, or some really aggressive behaviours, you might have to scale back and think, is it safe for me or for them anymore?
And I guess when there are like a lot of people with dementia become a falls risk, they
that's
say.
That's right,
so,
yeah.
And that's kind of...
You want to think maybe it would be a welcome change to go and travel. It's something fun. It could stimulate, those neurons. They've seen something that's familiar. Learning new things, whether it's is really good for keeping the brain stimulated. Definitely, play bridge. That's one of the research has shown that's the best thing to do. In firing
bridge? Is that the best
thing?
thing?
Not Sudoku, bridge, firing up.
Really?
Learning a musical instrument and a language are one of the hardest things, but yet the most stimulating for your brain.
Duolingo, eh?
If you're going to listen to music, obviously your music choice is fantastic, but symphony. For some reason, opera and symphony.
Really?
I think it's the way the music is and how your brain works. Yoram will be able to enlighten you a lot more because he's very passionate about that.
I will ask him about that.
And moving at least 20 minutes each day. We're not saying run on the spot and, burn yourself out.
It's just moving. It's just not sitting.
Moving, not sitting. And again, invite Yoram to talk about the fantastic research that's been done about that around how you can age really well, which is all related to, dementia. But when you travel, make sure that obviously they're travelling with someone they trust, which will be the care partner and or another family member.
I think it's really good advice to try and have more than one person there, because it is actually, it makes logistics much easier, I think. And it means that the care is having some respite during the trip, whether it's a day trip or an overnight trip. And I think that's probably another good thing that I saw on your website there is actually, which a lot of people don't think of, is just scaling back the travelling.
Just give it a try. Go for an overnight.
Go for a little
see how,
thing. Go
yes,
for
that was okay.
even
that
just
was
go for
good.
afternoon tea. Go for morning tea. Keep those little things going, and then see where you're at.
Because if something does go wrong overseas, or if you're outside of New Zealand, it can be really scary. You know, if I look back to an example where someone went overseas and the dementia wasn't quite well known, or it hadn't been diagnosed, or there was a bit of suspicion, but not understanding it, and that particular person did walk with purpose, went shopping for a said item, but never went to the shop and ended up being lost overseas for a couple of hours, which was very frightening. Got found by the police, but that was a significant time for the person to go, I think I need to replan how I travel, because that I need to now go with the person and not let them think they can go on their own. So that could happen, but if you've got to be prepared to do everything for two. So you may need to make all the arrangements and hold all the money and documents as the person, there's a care partner. So that's the change. You know, often it might have been the husband or the wife that holds that. It has to be the other person holding that.
Yeah.
And, you know, ask for assistance. I think, and again, that is a personal preference, because if you've got that denial or you've got that stigma feeling, a lot of people don't share it. They hold into it. They don't want to tell anybody for fear of judgment.
Yeah.
And we're all about lessening that stigma, because stigma is the stigma that you feel, but it's associated stigma that you'd have, you know, that with your family, and the societal stigma that has towards you. So stigma is huge.
It's quite hard, isn't it? And I think that stigma leads a lot of people to be very late in their diagnosis. And I think that also has the potential to be very hard on everyone.
That's right.
And
you soldier on until you hit a point where you think, something's up. And stigma.
Or when the carers can't care anymore.
That's right.
And it's their breaking
They've
point.
past, yeah.
And then, you know, that can be really far too late. And then it means that, I guess, the trends, like when you get to the point, and there will be a lot of people with dementia that do get to a point where they can't be cared for in the home. I don't know if you've got statistics on that sort of thing.
We're generating a lot more data around that. Data is something we're working on with Alzheimer's New Zealand and Dementia New Zealand, just to get a better picture of sort of where we're at. But the stigma is also in raising awareness of probably a lot around misunderstanding, misconception, and lack of information and understanding, really knowledge of what dementia is, that it isn't, you haven't done something bad. You know, it doesn't pick on genders. It's not ethnic picking. It is just... It's a thing that happens to you, and it's just something that happens.
And I think also just like the recognition that it is an illness.
Yep, and it's terminal.
You know, if you have a broken leg, you go and get help for it. If you get a diagnosis of anything that's in any other part of your body, people just go to the GP and then they get referred to a specialist or a consultant, and we talk about it. But somehow, if it's something to do with your mind and your brain,
because you can't see it, it's a silent.
You can't see it, but I mean, you can see the symptoms of it. And it's like it's an actual physical process. So it's not
because
like
they still look the same. They're changing sort of daily or weekly or monthly, and it's progressive. There is no magic pill. There is an end to it. You're losing a little bit of that person. So there's that ambiguous loss and grief, which a lot of people don't. They know they're going through it. They don't recognise it or acknowledge it.
And hopefully later in the mini-series we can get someone from a counsellor, a grief counsellor from that deals a lot with dementia, and not with just people with dementia, but also the carers of people with dementia. So we're really that's one of our other episodes. But I thought just one big thing that I think it is worth just going through is, and this is something that people really, it is really useful to do as a family, is thinking about the enduring power of attorney, the EPOAs, and the advance directives and wills and things, because I think it is confusing, it is difficult, it's the difficult subjects, the difficult things to talk about, but...
exactly, or couples think, I have a will and that's enough, and they're misunderstanding what an enduring power of attorney means, making those medical decisions on behalf of someone as a supported choice there, and that it needs to be in place for things to happen.
Yeah, and I hear this a lot as people saying things like, oh, I'm not there yet, I don't need an enduring power of attorney. So what would you say when someone
I would say everyone should have it as soon as you think you have it. I should be having it, as a young
really
adult.
No matter what age you are. Because
I'm a young adult with children, and if something happens to me, it is not in place. So it should be something in place. It's the will end, because then you've got it in place. It can stay in place for years until at the point that you have to be activated. Now, for that to happen, there needs to be a needs assessor or a specialist referral or a GP to determine that there is no capacity anymore of that person to make those decisions themselves, and then it's activated. And
so you can have one, and you can have one in place for a long time.
Yep.
Before it's activated.
That's
so
right.
It's an in-case situation.
That's right.
So if you've got, I imagine if you've got just the very initial stages of dementia, but you're still, you might be forgetting things a little bit, you might have an early diagnosis, but you really are still able to make decisions yourself, then you're still able to make your own EPOA.
That's right, and that's what we say to people. You can then set the course. You can plan ahead for your own journey. You can have as much input for your quality of life and what you would like to happen in place, so that when it does happen, your wishes and your rights have been acknowledged and your family understand what it is you want. Because some people go, well, I've got an EPOA in place, it's activated, and instantly they make the decision that's far removed from what was in there. So they've got to understand that EPOA is also around that supported choice. What is the best choice I'm making here? Those decisions that are based on those person's wishes and needs. And
it can actually be quite a good trigger, I imagine, for actually starting those conversations. Yep. And, I was just thinking, if you're at home for the holidays and you've been away, it could be something as simple as saying, hey, the folk at work were doing this earlier on and we thought we'd do ours as well, and we'd discuss it with you, and we thought maybe it'd be good, like including yourself.
That's right.
In the conversation. And, I weird about it, but I've had my funeral playlist sorted out for some time, and I do tweak it every now and again. But I feel like if I'm going to have a funeral, I want to have my playlist on it. And I think there's all sorts of things like that. It takes the
stress away from the care partners and families, which often we don't think about. Now we're at the situation, we're at this crossroad. The stress of what would mum like, what would dad like, talking from my own experience where my father died, it was suddenly what was dad's funeral going to look like? And there was 3 different ways we'd have wanted. Mum had her way and myself and my sisters had our way, and we very much went mum's way, but it was like, what about my choices in this, and what would dad want? But, bringing it back to the dementia, it's talking about what is it you want, what care do you want, what are we going to do? And you can start those conversations over Christmas. It doesn't have to be too heavy. We had that recently with my husband's family, because I think between him and his brothers and sisters had very different ideas of what his mum and dad want, and mum had a different idea of what she wants. So it was great just to say, okay, in this incident, or if this happened, what do I want? And she was very clear, I don't want this, or I would like this. So that was good.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because even in close families, it's such a trigger conversation that a lot of people have just shied away from it forever. Yep. And so you really, when you actually sit down, you can actually have and everyone's relationship with everyone else is different. Like your relationship with your mother is different from your sister's relationship with your mother, or your father's relationship with your mother. So your impression of what they may or may not want is all kind of through that lens of whether you're a sibling or a daughter or a partner.
And who is the best person in that family unit to hold that enduring power of attorney. It doesn't always have to be the spouse. It could be an older child, or it could be the one that lives there or doesn't live there. They've got to decide. So there's a lot of decisions to be made to work collectively as a family, or you might say this person is the legal person on the piece of paper, but working in collaboration with everybody else is the ultimate, right? When we have a family that's low stress, low priority, that's when things are working really well. It's when it's not, or it hasn't been in place, it gets really challenging, because if there isn't an enduring power of attorney in place, welfare guardianship needs to be activated. It's more expensive and it's incredibly stressful. Can take a long time. And if they're at a crisis point where there's some respite care is needed because they've got to that point, it can hold a lot of things up, and then it becomes really anxious for everybody.
And I guess it can also mean that things go past to that crisis point, and then it's a much more stressful, and then there's kind of...
You haven't transitioned yourself as care partners and family, or even the person with dementia, into this is where we could be going. Because when we support people, we do say it is a journey, and we've got information, and you can have as much as you want, cap in and out as much as you want, but there is a journey, and we can help you through those transitional pages. And if they have to go to aged residential care and you're rushing in, there is no transitional time to go, we've got to put them into aged residential care, or they've really, they need in-home care, or whatever the support is, because you can have it at home. The more time you allow for that transition, the better that you can have support for everybody.
Yeah. And of course there's a difference between the EPOA, the Enduring Power of Attorney, for well-being and for financial matters. So, and you might want to split them and between different members of the family, or you might want to say, because the financial one, you can do that at any time. You can say, okay, well, you're fine, you're whatever, but paying all the bills, everything. And I think that, quite often elderly people, and particularly people who are at the start of dementia, they might be easy targets for scammers and spammers and all those things. And that's way more difficult to sort out. Yep. And one thing I have heard is that often it's more difficult at the bank and getting those activated, because of course once it's activated, you then you've got it made, you've got your enduring power of attorney for wellbeing, and then you have to get it activated when the time comes, so you can have it made well in advance and obviously update it as needed, but then you need to get it activated, which may take some time. Yeah. And that, you need to allow for that time, and having it already made in advance is fantastic for that, right?
Yep.
Because, and then activated. But even then, once you've got it activated, then you need to take it to the bank, and some banks demand a certified copy. That means you have to have it from the lawyer. You can't send them an email with it on. You have to, and there's all of those things with actually getting it. You have to take the EPOA to any banks that have got things, but also, the likes of the GP, like any medical, the dentist, like there's a lot of pieces to put together, and that takes time.
And that sits with the care partner or family. Not anybody else can do it. They have to do it.
And that is all. The more that's organised before it's needed, and I always say to people, actually, because people all say, I'm not at that stage yet. If you're at that stage, it's too late.
Yep.
Like it has to be done sooner.
Yeah, and you can tie that in with the advanced care plan, which is something different. That's more around your care. And
so what's the difference between the advanced care directive or the advanced care plan and the EPOA?
So EPOA is that enduring power of attorney, which is specific. It has to go through a lawyer to be signed off and held, and then to be activated has to have an assessment by a clinician to do that. The advanced care plan is something that you can download. It's available. You can fill it out. So it's personalised to what your care is. Do you want to stay at home? Are you okay to go to aged care? Do you want this? There's quite a lot of questions. It is a long page. It's 14 pages, but it's quite detailed. You can fill out as much as you want. There is a part for the clinical aspect, and that's where a GP or a nurse practitioner or a health improvement practitioner can fill out, and then it sits at your GP space. And you hold on to that, and you can change it. You can get help. So we wouldn't necessarily, as dementia advisors in Alzheimer's Otago, fill out the form per se with the family. We might just say, these are the things to think about. You could fill this in. Have you thought? Or we would say, here's an advanced care plan. It'd be really good for you to start that now, so that you're planning ahead.
So you give them a template.
Yeah,
plan
ahead now, so that when you're here. And so I'll give you an example. We've got a client who said, I've got dementia. He was very understanding and accepting of his diagnosis. He was very happy to tell people about it. It helped their life a lot. He said, I want X, Y, and Z, so that when I get to this point that I no longer have capacity, I know that what I've put in place is going to happen, and you can reassure me that, this is what I wanted, and that would help. And there is some progression to that stage where I can see it happening now that there is some settling, because the plan has been put in place.
Yeah.
And it takes the stress off the care partner and the family, like, this is what somebody would want. We're just going to go with that. Obviously,
there can
depending of their condition, if they can't stay at home because there is some aggression, or they're really not managing and they are wandering off, or they're walking with purpose and they're not safe, and they may have to move to an aged residential care facility. If that's the case, then you have to make that decision based on the EPOA. If it's been activated, make the decision that's safe for everybody.
Yeah. So I was going to say that it might be that as much as you want the thing to happen, and that's how you would want it to go, it's actually just
sometimes it doesn't.
Medically just not possible.
No.
And that's really an acceptance thing.
Yep.
And there can be quite a lot of denial for the person
That's right.
themselves
Yep.
and also for some members of the family and others. And it's just
You got to work through it. You know, we were talking as a team, how do you get around those denials or those resistance around accepting, getting the diagnosis, even it has to go into aged residential care or short-term respite or having someone come in providing some home help. There's all that resistance.
And I guess those
it's
things
just
like
talking, having that conversation,
Yeah.
doing those practice runs, finding the words. Sometimes you say, go and visit an aged residential care, or if there's a change in transition, like let's say Christmas is coming up and we've noticed there's a change in mum, she's still okay, but there's been a drop. It might be the time to come back into our service or talk to us and say, it might be a good idea to think where we're looking in the future for aged residential care or what's going to happen in stage that drops again. Think now so that it's there, so you're not suddenly slammed into it.
Have those conversations. And Alzheimer's Otago is a good place to start with those conversations. And you're sort of there, if I'm understanding right correctly,
absolutely.
if you're sort of a point of contact, so you can say, okay, go here, this is the information.
We're
for
a conduit.
Here.
We would say we'll refer you back to those needs assessors to be reassessed, or
and
we'd refer you to Aged Concern for falls prevention if that's what you need to do, or we'd give you a list of aged residential care places to go, or whatever. So,
and a lot of those care packages are there. Are going to actually if you access them earlier, they're actually going to allow you longer in the home.
That's right.
Potentially.
Longer in the home, because that is our ultimate sort of vision or mission, is to try and keep people living a quality of life at home for as long as possible. Yeah, absolutely. And our service is free. Well, some of our programs aren't, but our care partner service and education is free.
That's amazing, really. And a lot of information there and a lot of help there.
Yep.
And I'm just going to give the phone number there is 03471 6154.
Correct.
And that is just alzheimersotago.org.nz. Yep. And Alzheimer's, of course, is ALZHEIMERS. I say, of course, but that's not how I would spell it.
It's a tricky one to remember. Alzheimer's Otago.
It's a German.
Yes, because it was named after it. But now, if you look at all the other types of dementia, you will see they're not called that. They're actually called by what
type of. And of course, Alzheimer's New Zealand and Alzheimer's Otago, even though you're still called that, you do cater for all types of dementia. And also people who are just wondering.
Yep. Just wondering.
May I have dementia? May a loved one? How do I tell if it is? I'm concerned. And people just wanting, am I just imagining it, or is mum, is dad? Then
correct.
Actually
so
going to that either the website or ring it. And are you open over Christmas?
We shut down on the 20th of December, our offices. So we've got office in Dunedin, Alexandra, Wanaka, Queenstown, and we service Balclutha and Oamaru from Dunedin. And we open up again on the 6th of January.
Right. So it's but the website, of course, is always open, and there's a lot of information on there.
Yep.
And that number is 03471 6154. I'm amazed at how much information is on there. And of course, with you can do a lot of talking about the advanced care directives. Just, put on your funeral music, go through it on Spotify. It's a fun thing to do, It's really quite... I like it. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird, but I've convinced all my friends to make a funerals playlist, and it's a way of.
But if you share it with your family and then it does happen, which it will happen at one day, they can then know. Oh, cool. Barbara's.
It's one thing they don't have to worry
dancing
about.
To it.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel happy that she's doing it, and I think that's what happens when you do that advanced care plan and you do those things in place. You know that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That guilt of, am I doing the right thing, has been removed or partly has been removed.
Yeah, it does make it easier because, of course, when people do pass, that's a very stressful, everyone's grieving. That is not like having to make all those decisions is just so much more difficult then.
Yep.
There is never going to be an easier time.
That's right. And dementia, as you move through it, you're making more and more of those decisions as it progresses, and they're losing more capacity.
Yeah. And so there's templates and things for advanced care plans on the Alzheimer's Otago page there. And the wills and power of attorney, they do need to go through a lawyer, but you can go to the public trust, and the public trust page is there. You still need to pay for the public trust. I think at one stage in the history it was free. But what you can do is go through the template and make decisions and think about the things that are on there, what things might need deciding.
Or come see us, and we will sort of direct you to some connections that we have with lawyers to say this is a good one to go to.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us here today, Antoinette. It's been fantastic. And for those out there, you've been listening to the OI podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, watch out for the next 2 episodes in our mini-series on coping with dementia.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the OI podcast, the shout out for the arts, sciences and Mataranga Māori.
You can support this podcast by becoming a member of the OI. Check out the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences on Facebook or our website.
If you'd like to listen again to this episode or others from the series, look for the OI podcast on ORFM's website, oar.org.nz.
Brought to you by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, the Otago branch of the Royal Society of New Zealand.
This podcast was produced by ORFM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.